Hello everyone. In today's podcast, we are going to talk about faith and obedience in Islam. We want to explain what is the meaning of faith, what is God expecting from us. And in order to understand this, we have to first of all explain a few concepts. The number one is the meaning of the word Islam. And this is very important for all those people who want to learn more about the Islamic religion, those interested in Islamic studies. Islam means submission, obedience, surrender to the divinity, to God completely. And also derives from the word salam, meaning that Islam also means peace. And for the believer, this is something that must be very clear. Total submission and surrender to God. And regarding this, even though it is expected from the believer to submit to God's will, God doesn't force anyone. God has given every single human being free will to behave and to live his life according to the way he likes. Either he chooses to be a believer or a disbeliever. This is called free will. And it must be this way because there is a whole system in place of reward and punishment. Therefore, man must have the ability to choose. He cannot be forced. This could be explained, for example, like a student. He has to take an exam. But if he is forced to write down certain answer to certain question, the examination will be of no use. It's not fair. Why? Because it's contrary to what he actually must do. His proficiency could be properly judged only if the student is allowed to answer the questions freely and according to what he knows and about the subject at hand. Therefore, if his answer is wrong, he will fail, and his failure will be his own failure, meaning it will be his own fault, the result of his lack of knowledge. In the same way, man in this world is precisely in the same situation. God has given man freedom of will and action so that he can be free to select whatever way of life he likes and considers proper for himself, either the way of the believer or disbelief. And after that, then there will be a consequence, either reward or punishment. But these things I will explain more in detail. But before all this, going back to the importance of faith and obedience and the meaning of the word Islam, which means obedience to God. Common sense tells us that this obedience cannot be fully practiced unless people know actually what are the basic facts of life, in what he must place firm faith. I mean, if he doesn't know nothing about God, or in what he should believe, there is no way he could obey God because he has no knowledge. Therefore, he must know basic principles, basic understanding of what is God and what God expects from him. He must know how the divine system works. And first of all, the individual should have an unshakable belief in the existence of God. If he doesn't believe that God exists, there's no point. How can he be obedient to God if he doesn't even believe God exists? Therefore, for the believer, he must have a firm and unshakable belief in the existence of God. And then, one must also know the attributes of God. It is the knowledge of these attributes of God which enables man to cultivate within himself the noblest of human qualities and to fashion his life in virtue and godliness. If a man doesn't know that there is one and only creator, one ruler and sustainer of the universe, and there is no one else with whom he shares any authority or divinity or power or nothing, then this individual, if he doesn't know this, he may fall prey to false gods, to false belief, to idolatry. And he indeed, therefore, the main requirement here is that if a man knows that God sees, hears, and knows everything we do, either in public or in private, even our thoughts, then if the individual knows this, he cannot even afford to be defiant or disobedient to God. Therefore, these are basic principles regarding faith and regarding obedience. If you know that God knows everything that you do, either in public or in secret, and even everything that you think, there is no the slightest chance that you could do something or behave in an appropriate way, because you know that He's under, or you are under, eternal watch. He's watching at you all the time. Now, but if someone doesn't know these attributes, he might be misled because of his ignorance, and therefore he probably will be disobeying God. Therefore, the individual, the believer, must know about these things and many other topics in order to attain the knowledge of God's attributes, characteristics, and knowing this thing will help man to purify his mind and his soul, his beliefs, his morals, and his actions, and his whole life will be in accordance to what God expects from him. Now, it's not enough to have an academic knowledge of these attributes, like I memorize them and that's it. No. The firm believer must have a strong conviction rooted deep in his mind about this, therefore he can remain free from any doubt and from any perversion. Because if you could memorize things, but if you are not sure, if this is not deep rooted in your mind, convinced, strong conviction, then you might have doubts, or your faith might not be complete in this case. Therefore, the individual man must know in detail the way of living which he needs to follow in order to seek the pleasure of God. Unless you know what God likes and dislikes, there's no way that you can choose the right path and reject what is wrong. If the individual doesn't have any knowledge of the divine law, how can he follow that law? How can he follow what God expects from him? He doesn't have knowledge of anything. Therefore, mere knowledge is not sufficient. The believer must have full confidence. He must be totally convinced that it is the divine law of what this means, and that his salvation lies in following this system, these laws, holy books that God have revealed for humanity. Therefore, he must know the consequences of belief and obedience contrasted to those of disbelief and disobedience. He must know the blessings. There is a whole system in place. If you do what is right and what God expects from you, then you will be rewarded. But if you do what is wrong, if you behave in a disobedient way, disbelief, then you should know that there is a punishment. You should know that you will get back whatever you have done. If you have done what is right, you will get back what is good. If you have done what is evil, disobedient, then you will get back judge according to what wrong or evil you did. This is fair. Therefore, it is important for the individual to know that there's a whole system in place, and that the belief in life after death is also important. He must know that life doesn't end when your physical body dies. No, the soul continues after the body simply dies. Physical death, after that, this soul is alive, and that's why there's a whole system. There's the belief that death does not mean the end of life. Therefore, the believer must know without question that there will be resurrection and that he will be brought to the highest court of justice to be presided over by God Almighty Himself. He must know that on the day of judgment, complete justice will prevail, and that good deeds will be rewarded and misdeeds punished. Everybody will get this, everybody will get his due, and there's no escape. Either if you believe or you don't believe, this is what's gonna happen. So it's better for man to know, so you know how to behave, and then you could get the benefits of the rewards. But if you don't know by ignorance, still it's gonna happen, and you will be judged because you didn't even bother to look for knowledge or for answers. But in the world that we live in today, for sure there is a lot of knowledge available, and probably I would dare to say that there is no excuse really for an individual not to question what is the meaning of his life. What is he doing on earth? Is there a God? Is there a creator? Does he expect anything from me? What is the proper way for me to behave? What should I do? What happens after we die? What happens with the soul? Is there reward? Is there punishment? All of these questions, I'm sure that every individual have ever asked this question to himself. Therefore, there must be responsibility and accountability. And therefore, we have to emphasize that a man who has no knowledge of the world to come may consider disobedience or might consider obedience to be something that doesn't exist. If he doesn't have any knowledge at all, zero, then he don't care. He says, after I die, after I pass away, it doesn't matter. Whoever is religious, whoever is not religious, everybody will get the same end. Meaning that after death there is nothing and it's over. Someone behaves in this way because he has no knowledge, and therefore he doesn't know the proper way. And with this attitude, we cannot expect him to submit to God, because he has no knowledge. Therefore, how could he even be expected to shun his sins, which don't seem to bring him any moral or material loss in this world, because he doesn't believe in life after death, in reward and punishment. And by thinking this way, a man cannot submit to God's law. Nor can a man who lacks firm belief in a life after death and in the divine court of judgment remain strong and steadfast in the turbulent water of life with its sin, crime, and evil. Doubt and hesitancy rob a man of his will to action. If you have doubt, then you are not constant, you are not sure, and then you will not act. And this is very, very dangerous. You can remain firm in your behavior only if you are firm in your beliefs. If your mind wavers, you cannot remain solid in your convictions. Therefore, you must have firm belief in order to remain firm in your conviction, in your behavior, in the way you act, in the way you interact in society. Therefore, it is important that the individual man must wholeheartedly follow a course only if he is sure of the benefits that he will gain by following it, and the losses and grievances and the pain that he will get if he disobeys. Therefore, there is a whole channel, the same with the system that God has placed for humans, the systems of obedience and disobedience, reward and punishment. But therefore, profound knowledge is needed of the consequences of disbelief and the consequences of belief. And therefore, the knowledge and the belief in after death is required. These are essential and important aspects that we must have clear in our minds in order to live a life of obedience, the life that God expects from us. This is a very short understanding of what faith, iman in Arabic, and obedience means. In another podcast, we will explain in more detail about this, about the faith. What does it mean? What are the categories of faith according to the Islamic religion? The way we have to behave, more the explanation about the meaning of the word iman, and many other details. But we will talk about that in another podcast. So basically, we have here, we have just spoken briefly about faith and obedience and the requirements for every individual, every human being. He must know that there is a creator. He must know that the creator is one. The unicity of God is very important. There is no two, no three, no four. And therefore he is one, almighty. He doesn't share his power or divinity with no one else. Therefore he is the only one who deserves our obedience, our submission. And this is what the word Islam means. And therefore, if there is a creator, we must know what he expects from us. That there is a law in place of reward and punishment. But for this, he has given free will to the human being to be able to decide. He must know that there is life after death. And the individual will be brought back in resurrection. He will be judged according to what he has done. God himself will judge him. But in order for him to get a reward if he has done what is good, or punish if he has done what is wrong, he must know what God expects from him. He must know about the divine law. He must know about God's revelation. He must know about faith in detail. He must know that he has to have a strong belief, not only knowledge, strong belief and conviction. Therefore, this belief will shape the way he behaves in his life, the way he interacts, the way he speaks, even the way he walks. This is all important aspects regarding to faith and obedience. And we will explain, as I said before, we will explain in detail more about what is the meaning of faith and more about this topic in the following podcast. I want to thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, leave your comments below. Share this video if you found very interesting and beneficial also for someone else. Thank you again, and we'll see each other in the next podcast.